All right, so I'm going to ask you to be honest here. By show of hands, how many of you strictly follow the speed limit? Maybe you even go under a little bit. Show of hands, who here follows the speed limit? There's like 2 people, okay? See, 3 hands, we see 3 hands. So for the rest of you, I see that you like to break the law. It's okay, I won't ask for specifics. I'm just gonna say I'm a fan of going a little fast myself, okay? And here's a fun fact. Those limits are usually set by what 85% of the people would naturally do without any signs directing them what to do. I think I fall into the 15%, but that's okay. I think most of us tend to like to go a little bit over. All jokes aside, it's interesting how as a society, we've pretty much accepted speed limits as a necessary safety measure for the roads. We may not follow them, but we understand their purpose, and we agree with that for the most part, I think. Yet, when it comes to our personal lives, we sometimes, and often, impose limits that aren't as beneficial. For example, we may limit our own growth by doubting our capabilities and feeling inadequate. We allow the fear of failure to not take risks that could be amazing opportunities and rewards. It's like we put a limit on our own potential. And our health can also suffer when we limit ourselves out of laziness and procrastination. We know we should eat right, we know we should exercise, but we keep putting it off. It's like we put a limit on our own well-being. And then there's our faith. Sometimes we try to fit God into our own limited expectations. It's like we put him in a box. But by doing so, we limit his potential impact on our lives, and we limit our relationship with him. I've struggled with these challenges myself by trying to set limits on what I believe I can achieve and what I deserve. And it has certainly been a learning journey to realize that pushing past these self-imposed limits can lead to finding new strengths, experiences, and a deeper connection to faith and a purpose in life. And the truth is, Philippians 4:7 tells us that we serve a God whose peace goes beyond our understanding. So we can't try to understand it. And the sooner we grasp this truth, the more room we will allow to experience his limitless power. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the book of Daniel beautifully illustrates a valuable lesson about not limiting what God can do. So let me give you some context before we dive into the scripture. We're going to be focusing on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were a part of a prominent family in Jerusalem. And during King Nebuchadnezzar's reign in Babylon, these young men were forcibly taken from their home to serve the king in the royal court. And even though they were taken from familiar surroundings and family, they faced a culture that went against everything they believed in. They still remained strong in their faith, and they were there for a lot of years. They leaned on God for strength and guidance, even when things looked hopeless. Their faith was really put to the test when they refused to bow down to the king's golden idol, and the king threatened to throw them into a fiery furnace. And that's where we're going to pick up in Daniel 3:16 through 27. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you." That was pretty bold back in the day, by the way. "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, it's such a powerful statement. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold idol statue that you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing fire. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king, in his anger, had demanded such a hot furnace that the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. The high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their head was singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell like smoke. I don't know about you, but this story encourages me. I'm not sure that I would have thought I would be thrown into the fire. If I thought God would save me, I probably would imagine that some big burly people would come and just pull me away and I wouldn't get thrown in. But that's not the God we serve. That's what my limited capacity thinks. No, God went in them, with them in the fire. And I love how they declared, "But even if he doesn't save us, we will not serve your gods or worship your idol." Friends, they were facing death when they said that. And their faith certainly did not put limits on what God could do. They did believe that he could save them. But don't miss this. They were also prepared to accept his will, whatever it may be. And in that furnace, God's power was on full display. Not only did he shield them from harm, but King Nebuchadnezzar was moved to acknowledge and honor the God that they served. This incredible event teaches us about God's limitless power and his protection over those who trust in him completely. It shows that when we surrender our own limits and we fully trust God, even in the face of hardship, he can deliver us in ways we never could imagine. God is limitless. Let me explain how. He made the entire world by thinking it into existence. Imagine that. Everything you see, from the lush trees to the beautiful mountains and the ocean and the roads that were created, everything that is made here, he thought about it. And get this, God isn't confined to a place or time. He's everywhere, all the time. Whether you're on your way to work, whether you're at home, whether you're on vacation, here at church, God is with us everywhere, every single one of us, all of the time. And here's something mind-blowing. God has always been here. There's never been a time when he didn't exist. He's eternal, which means he's been around forever, and he always will be. So when we think about God being limitless, it's not just a big idea. It's a reality that shows how incredible and powerful he is in every way possible. So back to the question of limits. Have you ever found yourself placing limits on what you think God can do in your life? By doing so, you may have unknowingly restricted blessings that you could receive. Now, I understand that this is a tough concept. God doesn't always answer prayers the way that we want him to. Again, we tend to put him in a box and we want things done the way we think they should be done and the way we think they should be answered. And then when that doesn't happen, we're disappointed. And sometimes, by doing that, we limit God by expecting answers that only fit our understanding, but we already learned our understanding is so much smaller than God's limited understanding. Let me share a personal example with you. Some of you may know that my sister-in-law, Christine, passed away from cancer about 6 years ago at the age of 36. She left behind a husband, 2 young babies, and a family who adored her. We prayed tirelessly for Christine's healing, and I'll admit I fully expected God to show up in a miraculous way. There was a moment when I prayed for Christine, and I felt God's presence so strong that in my limited capacity, I thought for sure he was going to heal her here on earth. But God chose not to heal her. And shortly after Christine passed, we faced more losses. Our family dog passed away on New Year's Day. And a few short months later, my grandmother passed away. And experiencing these losses left me lost. I was deeply depressed. I was confused. I was basically numb. I felt like I had nothing left. I questioned God's love for me. I felt abandoned, and I had no idea what his plan was for my life, or if he even had one. Little did I realize I had placed limits on what I could believe that God would do. Yet during that dark time, God used people around me to lift me up. And gradually, and when I say gradually, I quite literally mean that because there was many times I took 12 steps back to take 1 step forward. I had to continuously pick myself up and dust myself off and move forward again. Because God does place people in our lives, and he will do his part, but we have to do ours as well. We have a job to do. We have to move forward as well. And it was only later that I realized all of this was preparing me for something so much greater. And that was God calling me into ministry. Even though I had once doubted what God could do, the support from others helped me embrace his calling. God took my pain and he transformed it into a purpose that I never could have imagined. And it makes me wonder, would Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have had the same outcome had they limited God's power? Before Christine passed, she had shared with me that she wished her whole family would come to know Christ so that she could be with them in heaven one day. She knew that even if he didn't heal her, he would work it out for her good. She trusted him fully. She never questioned what was going to happen to her. She knew God knows way more than we realize. See, he is omnipresent. He knows the future. He knows the past. He's in the present. There's so much more that he understands that we do, and we can't even imagine that. Well, there isn't even a word or words that can articulate how I feel, what I'm about to tell you. I'm going to use the word thrilled, but no, it's so much bigger than that. I am thrilled to share that Christine's husband, daughter, brother, father, and mother have all come to know Christ since her passing. Amen. Promised myself I wasn't going to get emotional at that part. I'm good. Every time I read it, and I've read it like 15 times by now, but it's true. My limited capacity never thought I would be here on this day, standing on this platform, preaching to you, and that her entire family would be saved. She didn't limit what God could do, and by his grace, her wishes were fulfilled. And we trust that we will be reunited with her one day. But the blessings don't stop there. Just this past weekend, her husband remarried to someone who also suffered a deep loss. The journey of healing in this family has truly come full circle. And it's a beautiful testament to God's faithfulness and just how limitless his blessings are. And while the pain of losing loved ones does still linger, his limitless peace comforts me. I might step out in the water and I might go under once in a while, but he pulls me right back up and I keep walking towards him. It's a peace that shields me, much like how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were protected from the fiery furnace. Jesus is with me in the midst of trials, guarding me from the flames that seek to scorch me. And he's there to do the same for you, too. So my question to you this morning is, are you ready to say, even if he doesn't, in the face of hardship? Don't miss out on what God has in store for you. My own journey proves that life doesn't always unfold the way we predict. Again, in my limited capacity, I could have never imagined the blessings that God was going to pour out on me 6 years ago. Even Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego couldn't have anticipated being thrown into that fiery furnace, yet they lived to talk about it. So returning to the verse I mentioned earlier in Philippians 4:7, God's peace is beyond our comprehension. And it reminds us that we serve a limitless God. When we remove limits that we set them on what he can do in our lives, we open ourselves up to experiencing a peace that surpasses all understanding. I am living proof of that. Then we open ourselves up to experiencing blessings that we could have never imagined, even when things don't turn out the way we want them to. So let me ask you again, are you ready to say, even if he doesn't, in the face of hardship?